He would boil girls in rose water to create an extraordinary perfume. Almost every day, another body would be found in some street or alley, completely naked and with their hair cut off. The whole city was in terror. Every possible effort was made to catch him, but he still didn't stop. This time, his target was a beautiful girl from one of Paris's wealthiest families. Reaching her was as difficult as solving an unsolvable riddle. But in the process, he was caught. In front of all the townspeople, he was sentenced to be hanged 2 days later. The order was that he would be hanged until he died. Hearing this, a wave of joy swept through the townspeople. The name of that monster was Jean-Baptiste Grenouille, whom God had given not a nose, but a special gift. An incredibly keen sense of smell, so powerful that he could detect scents invisible to the rest of the world. From here, the story goes back to his childhood. Grenouille's mother worked in a fish market. One day, she suddenly went into labor, and Grenouille was born right there. As soon as he was born, his mother kicked him. She had already killed 4 of her newborn children before this. She thought Grenouille had also died. But then, smelling the filth of the market, he cried loudly. His mother panicked and immediately ran away. People saw everything, and an uproar ensued. She was caught and immediately hanged. Grenouille was legally sent to an orphanage. The person in charge of that place was Madame Gaillard, a middle-aged woman who no longer had room for more children. But she couldn't go against the government either. Somehow, she managed to squeeze Grenouille onto the bed of some of the boys. But now the question was, what about the boys who slept on the same bed? There wasn't even enough room to stretch their legs. So the other children conspired among themselves and tried to kill Grenouille. Then Madame Gaillard found out, and once again Grenouille's life was saved. The orphan children were Madame Gaillard's main source of income. She made them work all day long. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. But even at the age of 5, Grenouille couldn't speak a single word. Moreover, his behavior was strange. He would sniff everything as if it were a piece of candy. This ability only grew stronger with time. Now, even with his eyes closed, he could identify the scent of things from far away. He could tell where a stone was, where a frog was, and everything else. After a few years, he learned to speak. When he turned 13, Madame Gaillard no longer had a room for him. Out of necessity, she sold Grenouille to a leather merchant. Meanwhile, some robbers had been keeping an eye on Gaillard. As she was returning with the money, they attacked her on the way, killed her, and stole the money. Grenouille was now sent to work in a tannery. At that time, the average lifespan of a worker in leather factories was only 5 years. The environment was filled with chemicals, foul-smelling water, and filth. Most people died within a few years. One day, his master took him to the city for work. And that's when Grenouille realized for the first time that the city was filled with countless scents. The air carried thousands of different smells, of flowers, spices, perfumes, and people. Then his nose caught a scent unlike anything he had ever experienced before. His master had to make a deal with a merchant next to a perfume shop. While his master was busy, Grenouille, following the scent, reached the perfume shop. There, he saw people buying various perfumes. At that moment, the shopkeeper offered a new perfume to a lady. She was captivated by its fragrance and said, "Sir, you are truly a magnificent artist." Then Grenouille smelled a fragrance even more captivating than any perfume. It was the scent of a young girl. She was selling fruit. Her scent drove him mad. He approached her closely. The girl, startled, asked, "Do you want to buy some fruit?" But Grenouille remained silent, simply staring at her. The girl reached out to give him the fruit, but instead of taking it, he grabbed her hands and began to sniff them. The girl, frightened, pulled her hands away and ran off. Grenouille followed her, tracing her scent, and eventually arrived at her house. He crept inside. The girl was alone. She turned around, startled, and screamed loudly. Grenouille covered her mouth. Just then, a couple passed by. Grenouille kept his hand over the girl's mouth until they were gone. As a result, the girl suffocated and died. Grenouille was filled with regret because he hadn't intended to kill her. But even after death, that rare fragrance emanated from her skin. He undressed her and savored the scent of every part of her body. This was his first victim. When he returned that night, his master beat him severely. He threatened to kill him if he disappeared without permission again. That night, he couldn't sleep, not because of the beating, but because the girl's scent had shown him a clear path. He understood why he had been born. He was born to capture the world's most exquisite fragrance and imprison it forever. In those days, there were about a dozen perfumers in Paris. One of them was the Italian perfumer Giuseppe Baldini, whose shop was located in the middle of the Pont au Change bridge. Until 3 years prior, he had been the king of the trade. But due to the emergence of new perfumers in the market, Baldini's shop had become deserted. These days, a new perfume was all the rage in the Parisian market, the same perfume we saw a little while ago. Everyone was crazy about it. Baldini also examined its scent. It was a mixture of lemon oil, clove extract, and who knows what other ingredients. He tried very hard to replicate it, but failed repeatedly. Exhausted, he fell asleep. Just then, there was a knock at the door. It was Grenouille, who had come with the goat skin he had ordered. Baldini opened the door and invited him in. Grenouille entered, but his eyes were everywhere. He sniffed every bottle, every vial, every oil, one by one. Baldini examined the skin and, satisfied, said, "Okay, but I won't pay you now. I'll come and give you the money in a few days." Then Grenouille calmly asked, "Are you thinking of making a perfume from the scent of this leather?" Baldini looked at him in surprise and nodded. Grenouille said, "If you allow me, I can make a perfume with the ingredients here." Baldini laughed. "You know how to make perfume?" Grenouille didn't answer. He simply began to pick out scents from the vials using only his nose. He didn't use any recipe or formula. He simply combined the elements one after another, using his sense of smell. After a while, what he created was a fragrance so unexpected and magnificent that Baldini was stunned for a moment. That perfume was even better than the best creation of his entire career. Baldini immediately decided he couldn't lose this boy. He bought Grenouille for a hefty sum, but then fate intervened. The very next moment, his former owner died in a strange accident. It was as if anyone Grenouille left behind met their end. Anyway, for now, the decision to buy Grenouille proved to be absolutely right. Together, they began creating various fragrant perfumes that became quite popular. Even Baldini's lost glory was restored. One day, in his joy, Baldini told Grenouille that a perfume requires a total of 12 notes, divided into 3 parts. The first is the head note, the initial impression of the perfume, which lasts for a few minutes. The second is the heart note, the theme or true identity of the perfume. And finally, there is the base note, the essence of the perfume, which retains its fragrance for several days. Baldini further added that the ancient Egyptians believed that if someone could create a 13th note after these 12, the mixture of all 13 would create a perfume that, upon smelling it, would cause a person to lose their senses. They would feel as if they had received all the joys of the world, as if they were in heaven. This wasn't just a made-up story. It is said that such a perfume was found in a pharaoh's tomb, and those who smelled it truly lost themselves in a heavenly experience. But unfortunately, no one has been able to create that 13th note to this day. Then, Grenouille said, "Master, I will create that 13th note. Just teach me how to preserve the fragrance of anything." Baldini said nothing. Now Grenouille was troubled because he kept having dreams of that first girl at night, and he was driven mad by the desire for her scent. Finally, he made a deal with his master and said, "I will make as many perfumes as you want for you. Just teach me the method of capturing fragrance." He had such a hunger to learn that Baldini had no choice but to teach him. Grenouille learned how to capture the scent of a rose. Then, using the same process, he tried to capture the scent of different things. But after repeated failures, he became frustrated one day and started throwing things around. That's when he was caught. Baldini arrived and angrily confronted him. "You lied to me," he exclaimed. He tried to make Grenouille smell some samples: lead, iron, copper, but none of them had any scent. Baldini was astonished. What kind of man was this, researching how to capture the scent of metals? Then he saw a cat in a boiling pot and became furious. Grenouille stood stunned, listening to the scolding, and suddenly fainted. A doctor was called. He explained that this was all a result of working for a long time in the tannery leather factory. His body had been slowly poisoned, and he was now dying. Baldini was terrified because if Grenouille died, his entire business would be ruined again. Just then, Grenouille regained consciousness. The same question was still on his lips. Is there another way to capture the scent of anything? Baldini said, "There is such a method, but I don't know it. It's only taught in a place called Grasse." Gradually, Grenouille recovered, but to reach Grasse and work there, he needed identification papers. Baldini promised to provide them. In return, Grenouille gave him thousands of formulas for various perfumes. Baldini was overjoyed and sent him on his way. He thought that now he held the key to success. But fate had other plans. That same night, his building collapsed, and Baldini was buried alive in the rubble. Meanwhile, Grenouille, after his journey, reached a cave in the mountains a few days later. He had only intended to stay for one night, but he ended up staying there because there was no trace of any external scent besides that of his own clothes. No humans, no animals, no trees, no soil, nothing. Even the stones seemed lifeless. In that stillness, he found peace for the first time, but then he realized that his own body emitted no scent. He washed, he scrubbed, he checked himself repeatedly, but nothing. It was as if he were devoid of the very essence of scent. Why? The answer perhaps lay in Grasse, and that's why he once again began his journey toward the city where the art of preserving scents was taught. When he reached the outskirts of Grasse, he saw a carriage with a beautiful woman inside. Her fragrance captivated him completely. What happened next? He followed the carriage all the way to Grasse. Showing his papers at the gate, he gained entry into the city. Following the scent of the woman, he reached her house. Grenouille felt every moment of her life. He spent the night there, and as soon as he got the chance, he climbed over the wall and entered the house. Then he saw her on the balcony, picking flowers to place on her mother's memorial. Just then, her father called out to her, and Grenouille learned the woman's name, Laura. Meanwhile, in the same city lived a young man and woman whose love had just begun to blossom. They would playfully tease each other even while harvesting flowers. After harvesting, the flowers were sent to perfume companies. Grenouille joined one of these companies. With his skills, he quickly caught the attention of the company owner, Madame Arnulfi. Madame Arnulfi's supervisor started to get annoyed with her. He kept bothering her all the time. Now, at night, we see those young lovers in the fields who had found an excuse to meet in private. The boy was eager, but the girls started playing hard to get. What's more, to tease him, she climbed onto the roof. Then she playfully pushed the ladder down, along with the boy. The boy got angry and locked the girl in the room before leaving. The girl, distressed, started screaming. And then someone put a ladder up to the roof for her, but it wasn't her boyfriend. The next day, the girl's body was found in the glass tank where flowers were boiled to extract their fragrance. The case was completely set up. The process of extracting the fragrance from her body had already begun. Just then, hearing someone approaching, Grenouille covered the tank with a sack. A worker had arrived outside with fragrant flowers. Meanwhile, she became curious to know how perfume was made from these flowers. When she went inside to look, Grenouille's heart started pounding. He immediately forbade the woman from touching anything. Just then, Madame Arnulfi also arrived. Seeing the boiler covered, she asked a question. Grenouille said he was experimenting to invent a new fragrance. The supervisor sniffed the water to check, but he didn't smell anything. He said that his experiment had failed. Don't waste time. But Grenouille wasn't going to stop there. He hired a prostitute. He had brought some animal fat with him. Seeing the fat, the woman was also worried about what he was going to do. Grenouille explained that he was going to make a perfume, and for that, he needed the fragrance of her body. The woman agreed. The woman's dog was also watching all this. Everything was going well. But as soon as the woman saw the knife near Grenouille, she became furious. Grenouille killed the girl on the spot. Then, with great care, he cut off all her hair and covered her body with a thick layer of fat, wrapping her in cloth so that the woman's scent would be absorbed into the fat over the next few hours. This process was long and tedious, but Grenouille persevered. Hours later, he scraped off the fat, collected it, and took it to his workplace, the perfumery. There, he mixed the fat with the woman's hair, then boiled, strained, and filtered it repeatedly until the fragrance was extracted in its purest form. Meanwhile, news of the woman's death had spread throughout the city, but no one had any idea what had actually happened to her. Then something strange occurred. The woman's pet dog, upon catching the scent of its mistress, went straight to Grenouille. Now everything was clear. Grenouille had captured the woman's scent in the form of a perfume. This was his first step toward success, but he wasn't going to stop there. Now he needed 12 more scents, 12 notes that would combine to create his 13th code. The following night was Laura's birthday. There was a lively atmosphere and a large crowd. Grenouille was also there, searching for his next victim. When the candles were blown out, the girls started a game of hide and seek. In this game, the boys had to find the girls. There was also a small maze nearby, where Laura and her friends went to hide. Seizing the opportunity, Grenouille followed Laura, slowly and precisely, like a hunter. But fate was on Laura's side that night. She escaped. By the time the game ended, Grenouille had disappeared from the scene. He had already left. But when everyone came out, a silence fell over the place. 2 virgin girls had mysteriously disappeared from inside the labyrinth. By then, Grenouille had already begun the process of extracting the scent of those 2 girls. The entire labyrinth was searched, but they were nowhere to be found. The next morning, their bodies were found in the water under a bridge. Their hair had been cut off, their bodies were naked, and fear spread throughout the city. Demands were made in court to impose a curfew so that the monster couldn't escape the city. But some merchants began to protest. They argued that a curfew would cripple their businesses. The judge also shook his head and said, "This will bankrupt the entire city." Laura's father tried his best to reason with them, but no one listened, and as a result, a few days later, another virgin girl disappeared. Then, the next day, the body of a shepherdess was found in a field. Her hair had also been cut off, and her body left naked. By now, 4 girls had been murdered. Only then did the administration wake up. A curfew was imposed on the city. Police were deployed in every street and neighborhood. But the murders didn't stop. Grenouille continued to capture one scent after another. He had now created 5 notes from the scents of 5 different girls. Then the 6th girl also became his victim. Panic in the city was at its peak. The police were helpless. They had neither any clues nor any witnesses. Meanwhile, the 7th girl also disappeared. By now, Laura's father had understood that this murderer was not ordinary. He noticed that all the girls who had been targeted were virgins and exceptionally beautiful, meaning the murderer was taking something from their beauty, whether it was their hair, skin, or something else. He had now reached a completely different conclusion. The city's prominent citizens were still discussing this when another piece of news arrived. The 9th girl had also disappeared. Now only one thing remained in the air of grass: the scent of fear. If any young man even dared to linger near a girl, the girls would attack him without hesitation, beating him to a pulp. The next day, news broke that the 10th girl had disappeared. Now people started closing their windows, doors, and even the small vents that let in light. One man was gathering wood to board up his windows when the body of the 10th girl was found among the pile of logs. Within a few days, the 11th girl also disappeared. By now, Grenouille had created 11 notes for his perfume. His 13th perfume was almost complete. He only needed 2 more scents. But the fear he had instilled in the city was so great that people suspected everyone and shot at anyone without thinking. Grasse had become less of a city and more of a closed prison, where every person felt that they might be the next victim. Things reached a breaking point when the body of a nun was found inside the church. This murder was the most horrific of all, because now even a sacred place was no longer safe. Meanwhile, Grenouille only needed one last victim to complete his 13th note. And then a miracle happened. News spread that the murderer had been caught. Everyone was stunned when they learned that he had surrendered himself and confessed to all his crimes. It was as if a festival had returned to the city. People danced and sang in the streets all night. The celebrations continued for hours. But Laura's father was still uneasy. He was haunted by a sense of impending doom. He wondered what would happen if the man who surrendered wasn't the real killer. That night, he somehow managed to fall asleep. But then he had a terrible nightmare. Terrified, he rushed to Laura's room. She was alive, but the window was open. Laura said she hadn't opened the window. Hearing this, he was horrified. Without wasting a moment, he decided that they would leave the city at dawn. The very next day, they took Laura to a secret hideout. But Grenouille's nose recognized Laura's scent. He followed the scent, tracking them down. Meanwhile, another discovery was made in the city. The prostitute's dog had started digging in the ground. When the police arrived, they found several girls' clothes and hair buried beneath the soil. Everything became clear. Grenouille was the real murderer. By the time the investigation was complete, Grenouille had reached his last victim's hiding place. Laura's father had chosen a safe room and locked her inside, thinking she was completely safe. But he made a big mistake. He left the key on the table. In the middle of the night, when everyone was fast asleep, Grenouille crept in. He picked up the key, opened the door, and did what he had come to do. Then he disappeared without a trace. In the morning, when Laura's father opened the door, his scream echoed throughout the house. Laura lay dead on the bed. He immediately sent his men out. Find that monster. Find him wherever he is. Meanwhile, Grenouille had now completed his 13th note. When he combined the 12 notes with the 13th, his perfect perfume was ready. But at that very moment, Laura's father's men arrived at his hideout. He was caught. When he was questioned harshly about why he killed Laura, he had only one answer. I needed her, and that's all. Each time he was asked, he repeated the same thing in the same calm voice. The story now returns to the day Grenouille was to be executed. The atmosphere in the city was like a festival. Crowds filled the streets. People lined the rooftops. Everyone was eager to see the notorious murderer die. Inside the prison, all the arrangements had been made. The jailer came to fetch him, and that's when Grenouille seized the opportunity and opened his bottle of perfume. As its fragrance spread through the air, a magical spell was cast over the entire atmosphere. The scent overwhelmed everyone's senses. The jailer, the soldiers, everyone froze. When Grenouille was led to the execution platform, the executioner knelt before him. But it didn't end there. As Grenouille wafted the perfume scent into the air, the crowd went wild. The scene was nothing short of heavenly. Some called him an angel, others an angel of love. People began embracing each other. Every face bore a mixture of love and lust. People who hated each other were now expressing their love without hesitation. No restrictions, no shame, just a surging sea of desire. Even the church priest couldn't restrain himself. Everyone believed he was not a man, but an incarnation of God. At that moment, sadness clouded his face. He realized that even after all this, he hadn't felt a single spark of love. He remembered the first girl he had seen, the one who had awakened the feeling of love in him for the first time. He wept, thinking that if he hadn't accidentally killed her, she might have been with him today. Just then, Laura's father, sword in hand, rushed through the crowd toward him. You can deceive everyone, but not me. Grenouille surrendered, saying, Finish me. I am not worthy of anyone's love. But as he approached, the fragrance enveloped him. His eyes softened. The sword fell to the ground, and in the next moment, he said, Son, you are my son. Grenouille stood there calmly as if he knew that even in victory, he had lost everything. A few hours later, when the effect of the magical perfume wore off, people were stunned to find themselves in compromising situations. No one remembered anything. Only shame and silence enveloped the entire city. The town council immediately decided to reopen the investigation. This time, suspicion fell on Grenouille's supervisor. He was arrested and subjected to 14 hours of continuous torture. Finally, he confessed to everything. Yes, I committed the murders. The next moment, he was hanged, and the case was closed. But the real murderer, Grenouille, had already traveled halfway to Paris. He still had enough perfume to enslave half the world with its magic if he wanted to. He could have had wealth, fame, and power. But there was still an emptiness within him. He had achieved everything except the feeling of love he had been searching for. He had won, yet he had lost, and this defeat had broken him from within. So he returned to his birthplace, Paris. In the darkness of the night, he arrived at the very place where he had been born, in the filthy, stinking, and decaying streets. He poured the entire bottle of perfume over himself, and then what was bound to happen, happened. The beggars, thugs, and hungry people there pounced on him. In a few moments, they devoured him completely. So friends, this was the story of Perfume 2006. The story of a man who immortalized fragrance, but could not awaken the fragrance of love within himself. If you liked this story, please give us a like and a comment for our efforts.